Imagine a land so dry that the earth splits open like a broken mirror, a land where rivers have vanished and ponds have turned into lifeless dust. In this place, children as young as 6 walk 5 miles under a burning sun carrying nothing but a plastic jerry can. Not for a treasure, not for opportunity, just for water. Often muddy, sometimes toxic, but always desperately needed. This is not fiction. This is the daily reality in northern Burkina Faso. In villages like Seno and Yaga, survival has become a calculation of distance, heat, and hope. A single liter of clean water can cost more than a family's daily meal, and yet rain comes too little too late if it comes at all. Foreign aid promises help but rarely delivers it. Shallow wells collapse, dams break, and the people wait, always waiting. But one man refuses to wait. President Ibrahim Traore, a leader barely in his 30s, has decided that his country will no longer beg for water, no longer depend on outsiders to solve its problems. He has launched what may be the most audacious water initiative Africa has ever seen. Ultra-deep wells, solar-powered systems, and a plan that puts local people, not foreign donors, at the center. Could this bold plan work? Can a land of drought become a symbol of African resilience? This is the story of what happens when a nation dares to drill deeper than anyone has dared before, not only into the soil but into the soul of its own destiny. Stay with us, because this is not just about water, it is about dignity. Sometimes we cannot help but wonder why creation has been so harsh to Africa. The skies rarely weep, the earth offers more dust than harvest. The winds carry not songs but sand. Our riches have been stripped, our hopes drained like dry rivers. And now what remains? A continent too often defined by poverty, a people too often seen through the lens of struggle. But still we endure, still we rise. To those watching from every corner of this earth, where are you right now? Leave us a message. Let us know we are not alone in this journey. Let your words be the breeze that reminds us that the world still listens, that hope still travels, and that Africa still matters. Northern Burkina Faso is not unfamiliar with suffering. For generations, its people have battled a silent enemy, the slow, unrelenting disappearance of water. This is not a recent problem. It is a crisis built over decades. Climate change has tightened its grip, shrinking rainfall by over 40% in just 20 years. Once fertile lands now crack open in thirst. Wells once full now sit dry and forgotten, and yet the people endure. In villages like Gorom and Tapoa, life has become a daily negotiation with drought. Mothers wake each morning not to cook, but to calculate which child will walk to fetch water. Some trek over 8 kilometers. Their reward, a single jerry can of brownish liquid heavy with dust and bacteria. In the village of Kogo, the situation is so dire that a liter of water can cost more than a hot meal. But without water, there is no cooking. Without cooking, there is only hunger. And it is not just a matter of thirst. Without water, crops die. Fields once green with millet and sorghum now stand barren. Food prices soar. Malnutrition rises. With no harvest, families cannot sell at market. Poverty tightens its grip. Young boys leave for cities. Young girls drop out of school, all because of a dry hole in the ground. Even worse, the absence of water has birthed a new violence. Armed groups sensing the desperation seize control of remaining water sources. They raid ponds. They attack wells. In May 2025, 7 entire villages were abandoned due to violent water conflicts. The United Nations calls it eco-fragility, the idea that environmental collapse fuels social instability. But in Burkina Faso, people have their own word for it: survival theft. Foreign aid has tried and largely failed to intervene. Between 2010 and 2022, over $180 million flowed into water projects. But much of it evaporated into shallow wells that dried up, dams that cracked, and plastic tanks that leaked or broke. NGOs arrived with their drones and charts, but few stayed long enough to listen. The plans were made in distant offices, not in the heart of the Sahel. And so the people were left with dry promises and rusting pipes. Burkina Faso's problem was never just technical, it was political, it was about dignity. How long can a nation survive without its most basic necessity? How long can mothers comfort their crying children with the lie that rain is coming soon? This is not just a drought, it is a slow suffocation. And in the eyes of many, it seemed there was no way out. But what if the problem was never the drought, but the way we responded to it? What if the solution was not shallow wells or foreign consultants, but something deeper, something within? This is where the story begins to change, not because the rain returned, but because the people stopped waiting for it. In the face of this national desperation, a new leader rose, not with more promises, but with an unshakable will. President Ibrahim Traore, a former military captain, did not inherit comfort or luxury. He inherited crisis, and he met it not with caution, but with conviction. While others spoke of managing scarcity, Traore spoke of rewriting the future. His message was simple but revolutionary. Burkina Faso would not wait for the rain. It would not wait for handouts. It would drill deep, deeper than anyone had dared before, into the bedrock of drought, into the silence beneath the dust. In June 2025, his plan launched, the most ambitious water project in the country's history. These were not shallow wells. These were ultra-deep boreholes reaching up to 1,000 meters, a depth no international agency had ever considered viable. The cost immense, the engineering complex, but the reason survival. These were not just wells, they were declarations. Each drill site was chosen with care based on local knowledge and ancient intuition. And President Traore did not observe from a distance. He stood on the red dust of Kaya as the first rig pierced the ground. His boots were stained. His presence was symbolic. He was not just leading a project, he was leading a people. To achieve such depth, his government did what many thought impossible. It began manufacturing its own drill bits, capable of cutting through 50-million-year-old granite. It trained local engineers, it deployed smart sensors to guide drills, and it protected every site with security teams knowing that hope is often targeted. The obstacles were immense. In Dori, the rock was so hard that drills sparked like lightning. In Arbinda, saboteurs tried to destroy the rigs, but the work never stopped. Crews worked day and night. The machines roared, and slowly the earth began to give. But perhaps the most radical decision was this. The wells were not built by foreign contractors. They were built by Burkina Faso hands. Engineers, welders, drivers, farmers turned technicians. All were recruited and trained. This was not just infrastructure. This was a movement, a shift in mindset, a turning point. President Traore's vision was not merely to bring water, it was to end dependence. For too long, African nations have been told that solutions must come from abroad, that knowledge is imported, that hope is donated. He rejected that narrative entirely. Instead of accepting foreign blueprints, he crafted a new one, a Burkina Faso blueprint, grounded in the wisdom of the land, rooted in the power of community. And this is where everything began to change. For when water comes not as charity but as justice, it does more than quench thirst. It ignites pride. It transforms people from victims into builders. And for the first time in a long time, the people of Burkina Faso began to believe. Share this video for a self-reliant and thriving Africa. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from so we know Africa is not forgotten. Like and subscribe to support the rise of a stronger, freer, and prouder Africa. The wells drilled across Burkina Faso are not just holes in the ground. They are the architecture of a new future. Each site is carefully designed to be more than just a water source. It is a hub of life powered by sunlight built by hands that once dug for muddy water, with desperation now constructing systems of renewal with purpose. At the heart of every well is a solar pump. These panels soak up the relentless Sahelian sun, once a symbol of suffering, now turned into a source of power. With no reliance on diesel fuel or fragile electric grids, the system runs clean and free. This energy powers electric pumps that bring water up from hundreds of meters deep. It is consistent, it is safe, it is life-changing. But the design goes further. Each well is surrounded by protective fencing to shield the infrastructure from vandalism and violence. Around these wells, new irrigation systems spread out like veins, carrying water to crops, to gardens, to newly reclaimed farmland. In places where the soil once blew away like ash green is returning. Tomatoes grow where dust once ruled. Cotton fields bloom again. The land, like the people, is coming back to life. Schools now use this water to create gardens. Children not only learn mathematics and reading, but also how to grow food. This education is practical, immediate, and rooted in the land. Some schools have created meal programs using produce from these gardens, fresh, healthy, and homegrown. This isn't just hydration, it is transformation. Local markets, once silent and sparse, now buzz with activity. Vendors no longer spend half their day walking for water. They stay, they sell, they grow. Communities that were once forced to migrate in search of basic necessities now begin to settle, to build, to plan. Women who spent hours daily carrying heavy containers can now start businesses, attend meetings, even rest. Dignity is returning. In health clinics, the change is no less dramatic. Clean water means safe surgeries, sanitized rooms, and hydrated patients. The rate of waterborne illnesses has dropped sharply. Diseases that once stole children in the night are now losing their grip. Health is no longer a distant promise. It is becoming reality. And then there is education. In the town of Yako, school attendance among girls has risen by 22% in just 3 months. Why? Because they no longer have to miss school to fetch water. With water at hand, the future is at hand. The change is visible, measurable, but also emotional. You see it in the smiles of mothers. You hear it in the laughter of children. You feel it in the quiet confidence of young farmers who now believe their land is worth fighting for. This is not just infrastructure, it is identity. Every pump installed, every crop grown, every classroom garden is a quiet rebellion against despair. A bold statement that this country, long written off by others, refuses to write off itself. This is not charity, this is justice. And it all flows from one powerful decision to drill deeper, not just into the ground, but into the dreams of the people. For decades, development in Africa followed a familiar script. Foreign consultants arrived with briefcases and satellite maps. They drafted plans from distant cities like Paris or Brussels, then sent engineers to install quick solutions: shallow wells, plastic tanks, small dams. Some worked for a while, most did not. In Burkina Faso, the evidence of these failures still scars the land. Collapsed dams in Gorom, rusted pumps in Bolsa, dry boreholes in Oudalan. Aid agencies came and went, but the people remained digging by hand, hoping for rain. The root problem was not incompetence, it was disconnect. The plans were technical, the challenge was human. Engineers saw blueprints, villagers saw survival. No one asked the farmers what they needed. No one asked the mothers how far they walked. President Ibrahim Traore broke that pattern. He began with a radical idea that the people who suffer the most also understand the land the best. His administration launched a nationwide listening campaign. Local leaders were consulted, farmers were surveyed, elders were heard. The result was not just a better map, it was a deeper understanding. Traore rejected foreign contractors, not out of anger, but out of purpose. His vision demanded ownership. Every well drilled by Burkina Faso hands. Every solar panel installed by local technicians. Every pump protected by youth trained and paid by the state. This was not a development project, it was a sovereignty project. And the results began to show. Skilled labor began to grow. Machine shops opened to produce parts once imported. Universities began offering courses in renewable energy and water engineering. A generation of young professionals, once desperate to migrate, now had purpose at home. Security also took on new meaning. In the east, where armed groups often attacked water sites, villagers formed defense units. These were not militias, they were guardians of hope. Young men and women trained to protect the pumps to ensure the water kept flowing. This was not just defense, it was duty. The state also invested in redundancy. Not all villages received ultra-deep wells. Some got traditional wells, easier to maintain. Schools received rainwater harvesting tanks. Farms were given tools for micro-irrigation using every drop with precision. It was a national water system, layered, local, and resilient. And it was entirely homegrown. Other countries began to notice. Delegations from Mali, Niger, and Chad visited to study the model. Could it work elsewhere? Could this new paradigm, African-led community-owned solar-powered development, become the future? President Traore answered not with slogans, but with statistics. Over 312 deep wells, more than 12,000 cubic meters of clean water daily, and rising. But perhaps the most powerful result was invisible. The people felt proud. No longer were they waiting for someone else to save them. They were saving themselves. And in that shift, a deeper well was tapped, one of self-belief, national unity, and renewed identity. This was not just about water, it was about who controlled the water, who owned the tools, who wrote the story. Burkina Faso was no longer just surviving, it was declaring to itself and to the world that it would define its future on its own terms. In June 2025, near the dry plains of Dori, something extraordinary happened. At a depth of 800 meters, a drill struck water. Villagers gathered, eyes wide with disbelief. As water surged upward, cheers broke out, not just for what had been found, but for what it meant. It was not just water, it was proof. Proof that hope, when paired with courage, can change reality. Today, over 312 ultra-deep wells spread across Burkina Faso. Each one is more than a pipe. It is a declaration that this nation will not wait for rain, that it will not live on borrowed promises, that it can and will build its own path to dignity. The results are undeniable. Girls returning to school, farmers tripling their harvests, clinics running safely, markets thriving, forests beginning to heal. A country once synonymous with drought now stands as a symbol of resilience. And others are watching. From Niger to Chad, from Mali to beyond, African nations are sending teams to study this model. They are not just learning how to drill wells, they are learning how to believe again. Because the real well is not in the earth, it is in the people. Burkina Faso has shown us that even in the harshest conditions, something powerful can grow. Not by waiting, but by digging deeper. If this story moves, you share it. Let it travel further than water ever could. Let it remind the world that change is not a gift, it is a decision. The deepest wells are not found in soil, they are found in spirit. And that spirit now flows strong in Burkina Faso. Has creation denied Africa the one chance it truly deserves to rise? Here are the soul-stirring messages from the people of Africa, voices of pain, resilience, and a longing for unity, dignity, and a future they can finally call their own. My name is Mariam Bako. I am from Dosso, a humble village in southern Niger. I watched the story of Burkina Faso's wells with tears in my eyes. It felt like watching a mirror not of what we are, but of what we could become. For too long, we in Niger and across this vast, wounded continent have lived beneath the weight of dust hunger and forgotten promises. I have seen mothers lose children not to war but to thirst. I have walked the brittle earth praying for rain that never comes. And yet in the face of that silence, this story from Burkina Faso lit something deep within me. This is what Africa Rising truly means. It is not just a phrase. It is our defiance, our refusal to stay on our knees. Watching those wells rise from the dry ground gave me hope not just for water, but for dignity. For the chance to send our daughters to school, not down endless roads in search of muddy rivers. We are ready for the new Africa, one where we build, not beg, one where we protect our land, our knowledge, and our future. Africa Rising is not a gift from others. It must come from our own hands, our own hearts. This story showed me that. I dream of an Africa reborn where no child dies for a drink, no farmer watches his field die in silence. I dream of a continent united not just by pain, but by purpose. Let this be the beginning. Let every village hear the sound of drilling, the sound of rising. Let this be the song of the new Africa. Because I believe in Africa Rising, I believe in us. My name is Peter Odhiambo. I live in Kisumu near the banks of Lake Victoria in Kenya, watching the story of Burkina Faso's deep wells. I felt something stir in my chest, a quiet pain I had buried for years. It reminded me of the days my father could not farm because the rains failed, and my mother walked hours for water that made us sick. But it also awakened something else, pride. Because what they are doing in Burkina Faso is not just survival, it is resistance. It is Africa Rising. Too many of us have waited too long, waited for aid, for rain, for change. But we cannot wait anymore. We must rise. We must learn from each other. The courage of President Traore and the people of Burkina Faso is not theirs alone. It is a light for all of us. I dream of a new Africa, one where Kisumu and Kaya Lagos and Lilongwe move together hand in hand. I dream of an Africa reborn where our people build, protect, and lead. Not because the world allows us to, but because we decide to. Africa Rising is not a project, it is a pulse. I feel it in my blood, in the soil under my feet, in the stories of my elders and the laughter of our children. We must unite. We must share knowledge, tools, and vision. What begins with a single well in the Sahel must become a flood of change across the continent. This is our time, this is Africa Rising, and I will not just watch, I will be part of it.